And again, Stephen Baskerville is professor of government at Patrick Henry University. And he wrote the book, Taken into Custody, The War Against Fathers and Families. I can't remember the exact title. This is his latest book called The New Politics of Sex. I haven't read all of it yet. I asked him if I could read from it today, and he said I could. And he suggested this part of it. It's in the chapter Liberating Sex, the Politics of the Family. And this section is divorce. The hoax of the absconding father rationalized and leveraged a massive expansion of state power through emotional blackmail. It was nothing less than a declaration of judicial and bureaucratic war against the first and foremost feminist enemy, the literal embodiment of the hated patriarchy, fathers. Women are lone parents in 84% of cases, not because men abandon their children, writes John Waters, but because the fathers have been constructively banished with the collusion of the state, which encourages women to abuse the grotesque power we have conferred on them. Social science research confirms unequivocally that Waters is correct. Do you want to say something else? Okay. So long as the principal engine for creating single mother homes was welfare, the abandonment myth was only implied. Everyone knew that welfare was subsidizing and proliferating single mother homes. But until money became contentious, no one was greatly bothered with assigning blame. Most couples producing fatherless children were never married in the first place, so no documentation attested to who was breaking up a family that had often never really existed in intact form. As the problem spread to the middle class, which today is the fastest growing sector of unwed childbearing, this changed dramatically. Here the implicit became the explicit, with an open media and academic assault on two inextricably interrelated institutions that had quietly ceased to exist in the welfare underclass, but which were still thriving in the middle class, fathers and marriage. The matriarchal logic of the welfare state became more aggressive as it expanded, perhaps inexorably, into the middle class. This was effected through the most subtle and potent weapon ever devised for sexual warfare, the device that destroyed patriarchy once and for all by quite literally criminalizing fatherhood itself: divorce. Oh, yeah. Okay. Divorce has seldom been analyzed politically. Not generally perceived as a political issue or a gender battleground, and never one they wish to advertise, largely because they won an instant and unopposed victory. Divorce became, in fact, the most devastating weapon in the arsenal of gender warriors, because it brought the gender war into every household in the Western world and beyond. Feminists long recognized its political power. As early as the American Revolution, divorce was associated with female rebellion and power. The association of divorce with women's freedom and prerogatives, established in those early days, remained an enduring and important feature of American divorce, writes Barbara Whitehead. Into the 19th century, divorce became an increasingly important measure of women's political freedom, as well as an expression of feminine initiative and independence. But it was in the 20th century that feminists teamed up with trial lawyers and other legal entrepreneurs to institutionalize not simply divorce by mutual consent, but unilateral divorce on demand and involuntary divorce. The National Association of Women Lawyers claims credit for pioneering no-fault divorce as early as the 1940s, which it describes as the greatest project NAWL, I guess I don't know how you pronounce that, it's NAWL, has ever undertaken. Once the laws began to be enacted at the height of the sexual revolution in California in 1969, they swept through the legislatures of the United States and the entire Western world with lightning speed and virtually no public debate or organized opposition. By 1977, the ideal of no-fault divorce became the guiding principle for reform of divorce laws in the majority of states. Today, divorce stands as the proudest celebration of feminine power. Exactly the thing that people tear their hair out about is exactly the thing I am very proud of, says Germaine Greer. Contrary to popular belief, the overwhelming majority of divorces and virtually all involuntarily involving children. Contrary to popular belief, the overwhelming majority of divorces and virtually all involving children are filed by women. Few involve specific grounds such as desertion, adultery, or violence. The most frequent reasons given are nebulous and subjective: growing apart, not feeling loved or appreciated. Journalists, scholars, and other supposed government watchdogs trade in cliches about ugly divorce and nasty custody battle, but they have failed or refused to investigate in any depth. No legislative enactment has spread more turmoil throughout the social order, transferred more power to the state, or done more to debase the legal machinery from a dispenser of justice into a weapon of plunder and aggrandizement of power. For the first time, a legally unimpeachable citizen, no fault, sitting in his own home and minding his own business, without any finding of legal culpability for anything, could be summoned to a court and find himself summarily evicted from his home, permanently separated from his children, confiscated of all his property and income, and incarcerated without trial. But now, as it has been made to appear by euphemisms and platitudes, it has been clearly documented that the divorce epidemic is driven by a deadly, authoritarian ideology that sets aside virtually every legal protection afforded to citizens in democratic countries and has sent massive numbers of innocent people into a legal nightmare that frequently ends in poverty, prison, or death. Conservative moralizers have completely misunderstood the significance of the divorce revolution. While they bemoan mass divorce, they actively resist confronting its political causes. One conservative pundit, who later came to a highly sophisticated understanding, could even gratuitously defend divorce when no one in public life was attacking it. Maggie Gallagher once attributed this silence to political cowardice. Opposing gay marriage or gays in the military is for Republicans an easy, juicy, risk-free issue, she complained. The message is that at all costs we should keep divorce off the political agenda, quote unquote. No American politician of national stature has ever seriously challenged involuntary divorce. Democrats did not want to anger their large constituency among women who saw easy divorce as a hard-won freedom and prerogative, writes Whitehead. Republicans did not want to alienate their upscale constituents or their libertarian wing, both of whom tended to favor easy divorce. Nor did they want to call attention to the divorces among their own leadership. Vice President Dan Quayle was careful to qualify his famous denunciation of single parenthood, saying, "I am not talking about a situation where there is a divorce." The exception proves the rule. When Pope John Paul II spoke out against divorce, he was viciously attacked from the right as well as the left. This omission is especially puzzling and paradoxical among Christian conservatives whose pro-family advocacy is the centerpiece of their self-identification. Instead of following a fixed and enduring moral compass on divorce, observes a perplexed scholar, religious groups in America gradually accommodated a cultural trend that gained widespread acceptance. So glaring is the anomaly that it has even attracted scholarly investigation from secular political science. One might suspect that being pro-traditional family would have led the moral majority to take a strong stand against the easy availability of divorce. After all, it is difficult to identify a greater threat to the traditional family than breaking it apart through divorce. During the 10 years of its existence, Jerry Falwell's organization mobilized and lobbied on many political issues, including abortion, pornography, gay rights, school prayer, the Equal Rights Amendment, and sex education in schools. Divorce failed to achieve that exalted status, ranking so low on the group's agenda that books on the moral majority do not even give the issue an entry in the index. In the 1980 presidential election, the moral majority used voter registration drives to promote the candidacy of Ronald Reagan, himself a divorced and remarried man who had signed the nation's first no-fault divorce law as governor of California in 1969. One could hardly imagine a stronger signal that the issue of divorce would not receive the moral majority's attention. Likewise, the Christian Coalition. Quote, "The subject of divorce was noticeably absent from the list of issues on which the group spent large amounts of time," unquote. More recent groups whose names explicitly signal devotion to family preservation, like Focused on the Family and the Family Research Council, FRC, also ignore divorce as a political issue. FRC has stated that we will not relent in our insistence to reform divorce laws, but that abstract support has not been matched by a sustained commitment to spending time or resources on the issue, unquote. Such groups actively lobby on many issues that are hardly as directly relevant to family preservation as divorce. FRC staff also published editorials that criticized wasteful government spending, warned against universal health care, and challenged the science behind global warming. Certainly no one could deny that government spending, health care, and global warming are important subjects for American citizens and political leaders to consider. For an organization whose self-definition holds that it champions marriage and the family, however, these issues are considerably removed from its core mission. When confronted, the rationalizations provided by such groups are profoundly unconvincing. Our political scientists' observations confirm the personal experiences of those who advocate divorce reform. The FRC has stated that constraints of budget, time, and staff prevent it from engaging questions surrounding same-sex marriage and heterosexual divorce at the same time. But it managed to allocate its scarce resources to addressing many other issues of current interest. Even if one could justify on practical or biblical grounds prioritizing gay marriage over divorce, such a view could hardly justify pushing divorce all the way to the bottom of the pecking order, below issues with only a tenuous connection to marriage and the family. Long chapter. Unlike feminists, Christian conservatives, like conservatives generally, have treated divorce as a moral failing to be lamented, rather than as a public policy issue to be debated and reformed. Leading organizations representing Christian conservatives have treated divorce as a private matter to be handled by individuals, families, and churches, rather than a political question requiring legislative, executive, or judicial action. That's a quote from Mark H. Smith in Religion, Divorce, and the Missing Culture War in America. This anomaly is simply too glaring and bizarre not to be indicative of some larger problem. FRC Director Tony Perkins led the campaign against divorce in Louisiana. Because Perkins has established the credibility on the subject of divorce, the relative silence of his organization on the matter cannot be attributed to an absence of caring on the part of its leadership, Mark Smith observes. The FRC's priorities instead appear to reflect straightforward political calculations. Smith continues, their leaders seem to recognize how much a strong push to limit divorce would alienate their own members and supporters. As we will see, this has discredited their claim to be pro-family and pro-marriage and rendered their campaign against same-sex marriage ineffectual. To the extent that conservatives mention divorce at all, their approach has consisted of moralizing and scolding. Rather than confronting the law with constructive reforms, they bemoan the culture and scold people with the hackneyed feminist party line that divorce is caused by philandering men who abandon their families for trophy wives. As we have seen, current divorce laws were devised by feminists, and divorces involving children are driven almost entirely by women. I would comment on this that I agree with his, what he's saying here, but I don't have a problem with no-fault divorce. I don't think anything in any no-fault so-called statutes that allowed for no-fault divorce nullified the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Did it? I don't think so. The Constitution and the Bill of Rights are the law of the land. So, the government never had any legitimate business dealing with marriage and the family. It's a religious institution, marriage and family. Continuing. As cover for their timidity over divorce, conservatives during the Bush administration endorsed marriage education programs. Essentially, government psychotherapy ostensibly designed to somehow strengthen or promote marriage. Essentially repackaging similar fatherhood promotion schemes from the Clinton years. These were justified on the principle that marriage is a public institution with public benefits extending beyond private individuals. The time has come to recognize that marriage is a public social good, writes Matt Daniels of the Alliance for Marriage. Yeah, it's a public social good, but it's not for government to be involved with. The health of American families built upon marriage affects us all. Conservatives like Daniels insist that the family is the building block of civil society and that weakening marriage could therefore threaten the social basis of civilization itself. No one would argue that crime and child poverty in America are not the business of government. He wrote, and no one wants to see government turn a blind eye to the social trends that are doing the most damage to American children. Daniel's facts are compelling and borne out by social science research. Therein lies the problem with the fantasy that the health of the legal and social institution of marriage is an exclusively private matter. The reality is that our government is permanently in the business of dealing with the social fallout from marital and family decline. Decades of social science studies have proven that most of the nation's most daunting social problems are driven more by family breakdown than any other social variable, including race and economics. Yeah, but it's governments who are destroying families. It's the courts who are destroying families. So while it is a societal problem, it has to be solved by the people, not by governments. Not, you shouldn't be forced to stay in a marriage. I was against fault grounds for divorce because, if I had a wife and 2 kids or 3 kids, and my wife played around and committed adultery, I wouldn't think she deserved to be divorced from her children. Whether it's a father or a mother who was supposedly guilty under the fault divorce laws, the state never had any business deciding, who got the children. Of course, it used to be the fathers who would get them all the time, and that's probably why we are where we are now, with women exploiting the anti-father courts. They're taking advantage of a system that has, it may have begun with no fault divorce, but fault divorce was an illegitimate creature to begin with. Government never had any business dealing with marriage or families. It's a religious institution. So I'm going to stop there. That part of this book was more or less a rehashing of what he talked about in Taken into Custody, his other book on family law. And like I said, I haven't read this book yet, and I'm sure it's very interesting getting into the new politics of sex.